I'm often credited about the music concerts I had done. I think the only difference between George Harrison, who started all this wonderful stuff, and Bob Geldof, who followed up on it, is I wasn't a musician. I was just, a nonprofit director. Um, but I had started trying to do a concert when I was at Freedom from Hunger in, I think, 1971 or 72. We actually had more singers. Linda Ronstadt was on stage even, but we had more people backstage than we had in the audience because we didn't know about how to push tickets at that time. So we had a lot to learn. But I want to talk to you today about why I did these concerts. The first one was a Conspiracy of Hope. U2, The Police, Peter Gabriel, Jackson Brown, Joan Baez, um, Neville Brothers, and it went on. At each stop, there'd be another 5 or 10 more musicians show. Bob Dylan, it just went on and on. It was an immense success. It was a 10-day tour of the United States in 6 cities and was live on MTV, the first big show MTV ever did. And it was great. We had Miles Davis finishing. It was a marvelous, successful event, and we featured 6 prisoners of conscience that we wanted to get out of jail, and all this publicity would go to them. So it was a magical one. But why I did it is because in the United States, which is a big country, over 200,000, 200 million people, we had 45,000 members of Amnesty, or 35,000, and they're all over 40. And I'm thinking, I just came from Lesotho in South Africa, where every fighter in the streets was basically between 10 and 15, or maybe 20, but that was it. So I wanted to do the Conspiracy of Hope, and why I did so many cities in a row. I wanted, one, to spread that we're a national organization with international backing, but I also wanted to know that we were across the whole of the United States, and that, in fact, the the effort around human rights uh, in the United States had to be born almost, because I thought this is so small and it's the leading human rights group. And at that time, it particularly probably was the only human rights group that was internationally known at that time. Others were coming up, but they were still sort of infantile, or not infantile, but young. Um, so I really wanted to do that to, one is to get the prisoners out of jail, and the second was to build the membership among the young. And I thought music would do that. Music is the magical newspaper. You're allowed to make your own decision, listen to the song, and that's great democracy. And so I wanted to get bands that would motivate the young people at that time, um, to to join Amnesty, and also the spread of time from one end of the United States to the other and be live on television for 11 straight hours. You could pound away at your message of what Amnesty actually did. So we got across our mandate. So they not only knew about us, but they knew what we did, and that was terribly important to get across. And we did a PSA campaign. Bob Pittman of MTV generously gave us all the time, whether to get ads by Coca-Cola or Pepsi or something like that, or just use it yourselves. And we use most of it ourselves, just pounding away at the message of who we were and what we do, and invited them in, and particularly the young. And so many years later, I would say about 92, 93, I was in Los Angeles hunting for a manager. I needed his, whoever it was, I forget now. But anyway, this manager's son, a little chubby kid, kept walking around me in the office, and I didn't know why. He's coming back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I finally said to him, "I'm Jack Healey. I'm the director of Amnesty. I'd like to see your father." So he pulls his hands back. He said, "I am the president of Amnesty International in my school." And I walked into that office to see his dad, thinking, I just got confirmation that I did my job and it might be time to go is that this actually worked. We had penetrated not only colleges, but high schools, even grade schools. We were doing fine. And the support, if you look at the dynamics of that time, that music turned on a society in America that was much larger than ever seen before. We went from, oh, we doubled the membership in 1 week, and within 6 weeks we put in 65,000 new members at $25 each. So the money was starting to build, and it was working. In the meanwhile, we're still getting people out of prison, and prisoner conscience becomes a name in the country, and what does it mean? And it got all that explained and made us the charity of choice in America. We branded it essentially with that tour. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to brand it so the young would join the young around the world who are being tortured and killed. And that essentially pulled that effort off, and was highly successful. And that's why I did it. I wanted to build in Amnesty International into the charity of choice, and tell the reasons that it should be that. 2 years later, um, when I got off the plane the next Aix-en-Provence, my lady said to me, "Jack, now that you've talked to the Pharaoh Gary, now that you've talked to the Americans, I want you to talk to the world about human rights." I really didn't know what she meant, but as usual, she was a visionary and a firm one. She held strong opinions. It wasn't like light opinions. She meant it. And I started thinking, how could I do that? And that was the birth of the Declaration of Human Rights. I sort of also was feeling on my own that the issues of the mandate of Amnesty International, while good and built beautifully, and Benenson's idea from the beginning, and Peter Benenson, the founder, was really a great structure. But it somehow ultimately favored the West, as far as I could tell. It was against political imprisonment, torture, fair trials, or for fair trials, and no torture. Those are the four things. And I thought, if we went to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is the spine of the human rights movement that we all agreed upon, we could then look at the world in a more broad way than was being looked at, and look at everybody a little more fairly and equally about human rights abuses, so that a prisoner of conscience in the United States would be as important as a prisoner of conscience in South Africa. Um, so I kind of did the idea of the world tour in the sense of let's take it to the world and build it not on an organization this time, like the first one totally was for Amnesty International. This would be Amnesty International, but promoting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, written by the First Lady of the United States. This all made sense to me, and its 40th anniversary is coming out. I got a call from one of my predecessors, David Hawk. He said, "Jack, let's do something from the 40th." And I thought, boy, there we got it. That's the idea. I'll attach the 40th idea to my idea. And so I called Sting first, I think, or Peter first. I'm not sure how it went, but anyway, a close friend. And I called them. They said, "Jack, if you could put that together, we'll do it." So I now had, and then Peter Gabriel said, "I want you to add Youssou N'Dour. He's from West Africa. He's the voice of Africa. I think he's one of the great voices in Africa." I said, "Oh, Peter, you want that?" Yeah, of course we'll do that. And I want an African, voice in there, because I served in Lesotho and love Africa. So he was pleased to hear that. And then I think it was Jackson Brown that called me and said, "Jack, you got to hear this new voice, Tracy Chapman." And I didn't know a lot about music, but I knew she could sing. It was beautiful. It was, I think, the Revolution or something like that. And but Bill Graham had heard the same thing I had heard, so he called her and fixed that up. So that's how we recruited that. And then when it came to Bruce Springsteen, I was really helped by Frank Barcelona, who ran Premier Talent. He was a Catholic guy, and he liked me being an ex-priest. He used to say, not a priest, but an ex-priest. And he was his touring manager, and he had a lot to do, really, I found out later, with U2 on our first tour, as well as Bruce on this tour. And we needed a closing band that could, sell all the tickets for sure, because we really couldn't absorb a debt. We had to pay all our bills. So before I got Bruce, I flew up to see Reebok. Heard they were looking for a charity or something like that. I don't even know how it came to us, but we flew up there, my staff and I, Mary Daly and Jessica Newworth, and we sat with them. In a pretty short time, they agreed that they wanted to do this tour with us, and we had to tell them we had to come back to them because what we wanted to do is pay all our bills. And a lot of places we wanted to play had soft currency, so you would have to not make anything. Basically, if you played Russia or Hungary or this place behind the Iron Curtain, you got nothing out of it except cost. So we had to find a way to absorb any deficit because Amnesty couldn't take the deficit. And they wanted us to have a separate institute, which we did. We called Concerts for Human Rights. So it was actually a Concert for Human Rights tour, not an Amnesty tour. And we had to have the ability to do that. So we told Reebok that, and they said they would guarantee us up to 5 million. And I thought, okay, that. And the administrator, Jamie Adner, said that'd be fine. So we we then proceeded to sign that agreement with them. On the night we were going to sign that agreement, Jamie pulls up to me and said, Jack, he said, I think I might have made a mild mistake, but it might be a mistake. We might need 10 million instead of 5 million. Would you ask, Reebok to change it to 10? I said, oh, golly, I'm just going in to sign this deal and I got to double it. So I called Ferial and I said, honey, what do I do here? She said, well, just go in there and say, instead of 5, you want 10 million and just make it an everyday occurrence kind of talk. Just don't make it special. So I did that. I said to Paul Fireman, who's a great guy, he's the chairman of Reebok at the time. I said, Paul, we need 5 million, but we also I need 5 more million. I need 10 million altogether to cover any debt we could include, we ever run into. I said, no problem. We got the agreement. And so we wanted to play on all the continents of the world, in every religion of the world. So we would show the universality of the Declaration of Human Rights. And where we weren't allowed to do that, we were in Hungary. They were not supposed to shout anything about the Declaration or give out information about it. So Bill Graham figured out how to drop the lights at one point, and we just had people in the crowd, throughout the crowd, just throw the Universal Declarations of Human Rights in the air over and over again, just thousands of them at one point. So that was all organized by Bill and George Travis. That's how we spread Hungary. Maybe that's why we weren't allowed to play Moscow later. I don't know, but it was fun to watch, and I'm glad we did that. But the Universal Declaration of Human Rights tour not only helped other human rights groups and the small ones around the world, but it tripled the membership of Amnesty International as well. So it made Amnesty a perceived branded name internationally in places we hadn't been before. Of course, they'd always had the great respect for their research department, but this gave them a new branding, which of course helped us in our fight against human rights abuses. In the Chile concert, I was asked, I forget what year it was, um, we had we had played the world tour and we played in Mendoza, which was northern Argentina, so the Chileans could come across the border and go to that. And 50 or 60,000 did cross over the border, and that was during the tour. And we did that so we'd support the dissidents against Pinochet in the coming election, which worked pretty well. Um, so in the Chile concert, I was really honored to be asked because it was a Chilean Amnesty concert. It was in the stadium where thousands had been rounded up, many tortured and killed. Victor Jara had his hands cut off there, the great folk singer. It was a place of blood, um, and we were going to play in that stadium and basically baptize it or clean it and give it back to the people, because in most soccer stadiums in the world where violence has been occurred by the government against the people, they usually tear them down. They have to tear them down and start up a new one. But to this day, in the middle of that concert, to this day, even if the World Cup's played there, there are a certain number of seats set aside in the middle of that stadium for the disappeared. So they remember them, and every time there's a concert there, those seats, no one can sit in those seats. Um, it had an impact of immense proportion. the Chile concert was live in Latin America, Mexico, and Spain, and the contract came out of Spain by a guy by the name of Pino Saglioco, I think Live Nation guy there now. Wonderful guy, smart guy, very caring about human rights abuses and supporting amnesty and things like that. It really had the right. Again, I had my Bill Graham of Europe in the name of Pino Saglioco, and he got us a contract for it, so we were live. My first calls usually were to Peter Gabriel and Sting, and they agreed immediately. Once I had them, everybody else was going to come on board, and that's what happened. Sinead O'Connor, I forget all the ones, but we had two. I made it 2 days of music, um, and in the stadium during the concert. At first, there was these people trying to get under the stadium and go around, and I told them they can't do that. We have to protect the artists and their privacy. But the word came back to me they were trying to put down their flowers and their candles under the stadium where their husbands have been killed or tortured or kept or beat up or whatever. Um, so I said, oh, okay, open the gates, let them in, let them do what they want. Um, it was we filled that stadium with the backdrop against the Andes Mountains. It was phenomenal. It was a phenomenal sight. It was filled totally like Wembley was when we first kicked off. And I guess you look for moments like Biko and They Dance Alone, Biko by Peter Gabriel and They Dance Alone by Sting. The song They Dance Alone was written in honor of the women who we were honoring, the mothers of the plaza in both Argentina and Chile, who had essentially demonstrated every day for 16 years for their disappeared husbands. And the song is in honor of them. And that concert, we featured two torture victims who were not first, Veronica De Negri and Carmen Quintana, who were victims in Chile under Pinochet, and they introduced the bands that day. Both days went extremely well. We were live, as I said, on television, and it genuinely brought back a sense of excitement to people that needed a celebration like that. It really was really marvelous. And in the celebration, one of the reasons it worked was pointed out by Pino Saglioco that the young people there are the children of the generals in the army, and they would have been in that stadium looking at those great artists, and it would reinforce the message we were saying that Pinochet's over with, democracy's here, let's celebrate, let's move on, and the government will stop torturing and killing its own citizens. And that's exactly what happened. And to me, the perfect personification of that was I called Wynton Marsalis and asked him to play. He said, Jack, I'm happy to help you, anything. And he said, but jazz in the middle of a rock and roll show, we might get produce thrown at us or something. I said, I'd be worried about that too. But I said, the Americans played a dirty hand in toppling Pinochet. And I feel they need to see the clean hand of America. And the clean hand of America is jazz. It's invented here, primarily by the black community, but, integrated in a way. But it's the one contributions Americans, have made to music. So I'd like you to come and represent the clean hands of America, and which he did come. And so when he took out there, and he was going to play jazz, of course, at the first note of the band, four guys in Monty suits with 100,000 people, the place just lifted up off the ground. They played a song that just knocked out that crowd. I mean, I had no idea I could do that, let alone the reaction was so beautiful. And I thought to myself, this is perfect because Sting's song is about disappearances. It's about the present and the past, and the future is a little dangerous. But if we have jazz, which means jazz by its definition is democratic. The drummer has to have his way, and the drummer has to have, it's a process of democracy in jazz. And if we can get across that the future to these young people is like jazz, where everybody participates in it, and everybody feeds into it, and wins no better. Everybody is better than everybody else to say it. Um, I think that's what they responded to. It was like, here's your future, and without saying it's jazz or something like that, but I think the crowd felt exactly what Winton talks about is how jazz represents democracy, and they felt it, and they were so glad they were rid of Pinochet and moving on to democracy, and that's when I got chills because I thought, yeah, the dance alone is a song written for these women, and we honored them, and they honored us by coming to the event as well and being introduced and so on. But you somehow have to start moving on and looking in a different direction once you get rid of a dictator. So it was a pretty good feeling that when I left Chile that I had done my wee little part um, in another country, which I never thought possible. Being a little kid from Pittsburgh, poor kid from Pittsburgh, very dyslexic. I was born with a crossed eye. I was the little guy all the time. Um, I was really pleased. I really felt like a little Mighty Mouse leaving. Not that I'd done so much, but that I had done what needed to be done, was entertain Chileans for 2 days in a row, but they could celebrate the future of their country. So that's that.